afternoon, good morning, good evening, depending on where you are. We have another Q&A session now. Just now had a Q&A session in the monastery with another group of lay people. One person had been attending interfaith meeting. And in the interfaith meeting, there was a group of different people, and one of them was a scientist. And the scientist was an atheist and said, religion, spirituality is not necessary. Science alone is enough. And the Buddhist person said they got angry hearing this, and they're still angry. So we have to say 1-0 to the scientists. And the Buddhists will have to go back and practice harder and develop their skills. No point arguing for Buddhism if you've got to get angry. So, we have some questions left here. The first one is from Nazrin in Melbourne. Dear Luang Por, I often feel very overwhelmed to a level of experiencing heaviness in my heart area. I feel teary, unable to speak properly, with an urge to sob. Even whenever I visit Buddha Bodhivana Monastery or watch videos from the monastery, or when watching videos of Luang Por Cha, and when paying my respects to Luang Por and the Sangha, I am relatively new to the Buddha Dhamma Sangha. Why does this happen to me, and what does it mean? Well, you're not alone. This does happen to many people from time to time. And sometimes, like for you, when we first encounter the Buddhist teachings and really think about them, bring them into our heart more deeply, it can bring up tears, sense of sadness. I would say this is a good thing, even though tears usually are considered not a good thing. It's not simply sadness, but it's like the opening up to the sufferings of life, recognition that there is suffering in life, in our life, in the lives of others. Maybe even a realization that we have been suffering for many, many lifetimes. But at the same time, hearing the Buddhist teachings, contemplating them, also opens up to the potential, the possibility for overcoming suffering. So partly this is tears of relief and joy at hearing the teachings, coming in contact with them. So it sometimes seems like a mixture of both realization of suffering, but then also seeing the way out of suffering. And the arising of tears, or the experience of tears, is quite common in meditation. It's one of the 5 kinds of rapture, piti, that they talk about, that are part of the factors of samadhi. So as your mind settles down in meditation, focusing on an object, one experience you can have is you have tears forming in your eyes, sometimes just for a period of time, sometimes for the entire time that you're sitting meditation. Other examples of piti are hair standing on end, waves of rapturous feelings up and down the body, lightness of body, the heaviness of a body disappears, and even the body can seem to disappear. These are examples of piti. So generally, tears are seen as just a passing, you might say, a passing experience as the mind awakens to the truth. And you probably find that it won't continue all the time. It will be from time to time. Also, if you're experiencing a heaviness in the heart, well, sometimes we're also becoming aware of our own sufferings in life, the sufferings of people we're involved with, our own sufferings, and sometimes that can give this sort of heaviness in the heart. So the practice of meditation, generosity, loving kindness, I think are very good to deal with that. And they'll help to replenish the heart, boost the heart, boost the spiritual heart and the mind. So I would continue with your practice and just observe and learn from your experience. Certainly nothing to worry about, and you might find they're just kind of signposts on the way of what's happening in your mind as your faith arises, interest arises. These are the kind of experiences many people have, so nothing to worry about. Question from Kim in Melbourne. Dear Ajahn, sitting cross-legged will ground the body better, but I find at times the muscles on the hips and legs get very tense to try to maintain an upright position. If I loosen the muscles, I tend to slouch. Is that right, to have some level of tension to be able to maintain upright? Well, I think really it's possibly just a sign that your body is not fully familiar or used to the sitting posture. You haven't done it enough. Many of us, when we begin meditation, and if we have a lay life full of other activities, we might not have a lot of time available for practicing meditation. So some tension and posture issues is quite normal, pain in the muscles. If you're not that old, you might find that just regular practice starts to loosen things up, get your body used to the posture, and you simply reach a point where you no longer have to think about your posture. You know the comfortable posture for yourself. You can uphold it quite easily or automatically, and it no longer is an issue. But in the beginning it will be something you notice and think about, and sometimes we notice sensations and pains that normally we're not noticing, but now we are because we're becoming mindful of our body, more aware, more sensitive to our body. So it takes a while to get used to that, but just keep practicing regularly, and hopefully you'll find through experience, being mindful and aware of your body as well as the mind, you'll find that posture that suits you. The mind settles down, gets more into the meditation, and is less concerned about muscle tension, keeping the body up and so on. It will find its own natural level. But until that point, we'll just be patient, and if you slouch a bit and you notice that, well, just re-establish your posture. That's part of the practice. If there's a bit of tension, we'll just see where you can relax, what you need to do to find a more sustainable posture. And I always tell people, when I started meditation, I had a hopeless posture. I had a terribly unsupple body with lots of pain, and I had a lot of suffering with leg pain, back pain, for particularly the first year, but you could say for the first year or two of meditating, a lot of what I was doing was being patient with pain and learning to be mindful of pain and not let it bother me, with the understanding that probably a lot of the pain would fade with experience as I kept practicing, and it did. And for many, many years I hardly had any pain in my body with meditation at all. Now I'm older and going back to more pain, more aches and pains, but perhaps my attitude, and I'm a bit wiser now, so it doesn't bother me mentally so much. But you just adjust to feelings of pain and tension in the body, see what you can do to relieve it, but don't expect to have a totally pain-free body. Pain can be a very useful teacher, so try and learn from that teacher. A question from Irene in Melbourne. Thank you, Ajahn, for considering my questions. When I try to focus on my breath between my nostrils and my upper lip, I usually end up with a headache, even though I go through the whole body scan and relax my muscles. When I focus on my breath around my chest, that is better. However, when I zoom out a little and focus on my whole body, the breath becomes smooth, soft and subtle, and the sitting is quite peaceful. Sometimes I feel I should be watching my mind instead of my body, and when I look at my mind, sometimes I can detect a small commentary on what I'm doing, thus breaking the silence. Question 1. Should I continue to practice focusing on my whole body, which seems quite natural to me, or should I train to focus on below the nose or the chest method? Well, certainly in the beginning I would recommend just continuing with what works for you, that helps to improve your level of mindfulness, makes you feel relaxed, something that's sustainable, a practice that's sustainable. Helps you to heighten your level of awareness, mindfulness. So if being aware of the whole breath body or breath within the body you find works for you to sustain attention, it's comfortable, well, continue with that for the moment. But try to observe closely what's going on with your mind over time, because you might find what we say, being aware of the whole breath in the whole body. I think that's what you were saying. Yeah, the whole body. After a while, that may become the source for a diffuseness of mind. You're not in one place or another, so your mind can still move around. Over time, you might find it hard to develop states of stillness. If you are still good, carry on. But if you find over time the mind gradually loses awareness, goes into mental proliferation or sleepiness, I would experiment with bringing attention back to just one area, such as the chest or the tip of the nostrils. And what you'll find quite naturally is that if you're focusing on one particular point, then your mental energy starts to gather there. And that doesn't mean to say you can't be aware of the rest of the body, but it just helps to anchor the mind and improve the more refined level of mindfulness that might lead into a state of samadhi. If you're more calm, the samadhi is stronger, you might find you can be much more aware of the whole body. As I said, in the beginning, after a while, you might find the level of concentration, samadhi, is not so strong. So maybe experiment sometimes when you feel ready with coming back to just one point in the mind on the chest or the tip of the nostrils to see if it improves the level of mindfulness. There's a second question. If I can continue to focus on the whole body, should I just focus on the body and not switch to look at the mind? Although when the body is still, the mind also usually is still, but not always, and not for the whole sitting. Well, that's normal. We have periods where the mind becomes still, periods where we perhaps lose our mindfulness and the stillness is gone and the mind gets caught into trains of thoughts, daydreaming and so on. To watch the mind is not easy, especially in the beginning of our practice. We really need to develop strong mindfulness. Doesn't mean to say you can't develop some wisdom and understanding around your mind, but it's, our mind is invisible, it's fast, it changes quickly, it picks up objects and moves from one object to another very quickly. So most of us are encouraged to develop mindfulness on an object to improve our continuity of mindfulness. So that may be the breath or the recitation of Buddho or contemplating the 4 elements, one of them, or one of the 32 parts. There are a number of objects we can use. And to try and improve that sustained, continuous level of mindfulness. And the more calm and stillness you experience, you may be able to then contemplate more successfully. And part of that contemplation will be just observing mind states of mind arising and ceasing, and getting an awareness of the mind that knows, and then the state of mind, the object of mind that it's picked up. But then as it passes by, to sort of get this sense of there is the mind that knows, there are objects of mind, and they're not exactly the same thing. That could be with observing feeling as well, or states of mind. And also knowing states of mind that are wholesome, unwholesome, wholesome bringing pleasurable feeling, unwholesome bringing stressful, tense feeling. Becoming more aware of mental states in the range of mental states we experience, but seeing them as mental states rather than getting lost in them, and that's the hard part. So when you start to get lost in your trains of thought, moods and things that come up, daydreaming, stories, conversations, then bring the attention back to your main object to re-establish mindfulness and make the mindfulness strong and continuous. A question from B.H. Chia in Melbourne about refraining from speaking. Nowadays, I tend to refrain from speaking if there is no need to. But during work or when working in a project, I get labelled as very passive, unresponsive, and even cold to a certain extent. How do we practice balance in this matter? Well, you have to find it for yourself. Everybody's level is slightly different, because partly this is a character thing, and our character have developed over not only one lifetime, maybe many lifetimes. Some people incline more to the Pacceka Buddha style, the silent Buddha. They're just quite naturally quiet people. They reflect internally and think, but they don't necessarily say a lot. When not necessary, they don't speak a lot. They're not that sociable or gregarious, say. Other people are more bodhisattva types, and for many lifetimes they've been talking a lot, helping people, discussing things, talking, teaching, and they're always saying something. Others, are in between. So partly this is a character thing, so you can't always just compare one person with another, and you don't have to just follow other people's views on this either. If someone says you don't talk enough, well, reflect, is that true? And maybe in certain situations we do need to talk more than we do, and that may be true. Other times it's probably not true. So you can't simply take another person's opinion as a guideline here. You have to look at your own heart, your own mind, what your intentions are. There's silence which, like they say, is cold, angry silence. I'm not getting involved, I'm not cooperating. Or there's silence where you still have kindness for others and you're awake and alert and ready to help. It's just there's nothing to say at that time. So you have to know your mind and what's going on. Practice mindfulness of speech, clear comprehension, know the situation, know what's required, know what your role is, your responsibility in that situation. And trust in your assessment, your wisdom, and you can listen to feedback from others, but that's only a little part of the story. More importantly is know your own mind. And if you are a silent type, you feel there's no need to talk a lot in many situations, well, just make sure people can see you have metta, you have goodwill in your heart. So, sometimes you smile, or you nod, or you say the odd thing just to connect with other people, just enough for them to feel relaxed with you, that they're not doubting that your silence is a sign of disapproval or non-cooperation. There's no perfect thing here, because in society everyone will have a different opinion about you and you can't satisfy everyone. So your primary thing is to know your own mind. When I was a young monk, I did a lot of meditation, mindfulness practice, so often I wasn't speaking much, because when you're a junior monk in our monasteries, you often don't have a lot of role or responsibility in terms of teaching or guiding other people. So sometimes you don't need to say much, And this is one of the few lifestyles where you can get by without saying very much at all. If you have no duty of teaching or explaining things to anyone, well, you don't have to speak much. You can get on with your own practice. Even though you may be with other people, there may not be a need. But a few times people criticize me and say, you should speak more. So even in a monastery where people are practicing mindfulness and meditation and doing all these things that we do, they'll still tell you that you're not speaking enough. So the answer is you can't win. When it comes to other people's opinions, there'll always be someone who says you speak too much, you don't speak enough, what you say is good, what you say is foolish, unhelpful. You'll get the range of opinions. So you have to come back and reflect for yourself what's appropriate. But always maintain the metta, the goodwill for others. And sometimes you display that in your speech, your actions, so that they feel comfortable. They're not suspicious of you. I guess this is a skill, the skill of right speech and interaction with others. Some monks I know are very silent and they achieve a lot in their life, like Lumpur Liam. He's been known his whole life as a monk as a very silent monk, but it doesn't mean to say he can't speak. He can give wonderful Dhamma talks, he can answer questions, he can give good instruction and advice. When the time is right, he'll do that. Other times he'll be very quiet and he quietly goes about his business. And he's achieved a lot as a monk, as a leader of the Sangha. And a lot of that has been done in silence. So there's silence and there's silence. There's the silence where the mind is still active, mindful, alert, wisdom is there. And then there's the silence of the mind that is caught in a mood. You can be silently distracted, silently angry, silently indulgent. So really, the important thing is to know what's lying behind the silence. The next question from Glenn in Melbourne. The chanting guides are very extensive, a bit confronting. Can you please offer guidelines on which topics or verses are to be chanted and when? Some seem like staples, while others are less frequently used. Many thanks to you and everyone responsible for this online retreat. Well, the reasons our chanting guides seem extensive is because as a monastery and a Sangha, we were making a chanting book, and previous chanting books, which we had, always missed or lacked certain chants, and everyone would complain and say, we need this chant, we need that chant. So we decided to put everything in the one book, and it got so big we couldn't have it as one book, so we've ended up with 2 volumes with everything. So it's a reference book. Maybe you think it's too much, too extensive. There may be some truth in that, but at least you've got everything there when you need it, and you use the contents, and you don't have to use the whole book every day. You pick and choose as required. So like you say, there's some staples. So in a monastery we chant morning, evening, even at other times. On New Year's Eve we'll be chanting at midnight. And there's a whole range of chants we use, and some we do chant more often than others. So like recollection of the Buddha Dhamma Sangha, praise of the Buddha Dhamma Sangha, what we call evening chanting, morning chanting. These are the staples, chants you might do regularly. The reflections on universal loving kindness, the 5 frequent reflections, the 10 frequent reflections of a samana, the verses sharing merit, and so on. There's a number of chants we'll do regularly, almost daily. But then, it can be a little bit boring and dry to always chant the same verses. You get to know them quite well over the years. So introduce a few new ones is good. Ajahn Chah used to say, don't make the chanting boring for the community. Change the chants around, introduce different suttas. So here we regularly chant the Dhammacakka Sutta, Anapanasati Sutta, the Arya Tangika Magga Sutta, the Eightfold Noble Path. Sometimes we chant the Fire Sermon Sutta, the Anatta Lakkhana Sutta, the Sutta on the teaching of non-self. And there's Paritas as well, and then there's other verses of reflection, many of them. And we have a variety, and we change the lineup nightly. During the retreat, we're not changing it, just in case there's new people who are not familiar with the chanting. It's the same every morning, every evening, just for a few days. But in the monastery, we'll be changing the chanting lineup regularly and doing different chants. And so, when you do different chants, there's always a chance you'll hear something that you had forgotten, or it stimulates a Dhamma reflection as you're chanting. Or there's, a bit like music when you're a kid, a pop music or something, there's old favourites. So you chant an old favourite and everyone gets happy and inspired and it develops a good feeling. There's the prickly ones, the chants that everyone finds difficult, the rhythms are not so good, the words are hard to say, but those can be interesting and challenging. They're still teaching you some Dhamma, and it's a challenge to memorize those chants. Part of the monk's life involves memorizing chants in Pali and in English, and we've had monks who've learned the Patimokkha, so that's 227 rules, training rules, that are the heart of the Buddhist monastic code. And we have to learn that in Pali by heart. But we've had monks who've learned it by heart in English as well, just to be sure they know the meaning. And you learn it by heart in Pali, and then every 2 weeks, like last night, that was chanted by Venerable Panyasiri here. And most monks chant it 45 minutes takes to chant that from heart by memory. He did it in 31 minutes. Wasn't quite a record. He said his record was 28 minutes, but 31 minutes is already very fast. And so some monks really get into learning chanting as a practice of both meditation and wisdom, because you're learning to chant mindfully so you can remember and chant out the words without forgetting or losing track. And you also are gaining wisdom because you're reflecting on the meaning. And chanting can be like that, a very simple chant or a very long chant, it doesn't matter. Certain chants you'll find, especially if you practice them regularly and you can learn them off by heart, you'll find they resonate with you. You'll find that they can bring out a very wholesome mood when you may have been very distracted or sad or angry. They can remind you of the teachings. They can help you to focus your mind back on Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha, the path of the training. They can put you into a state of samadhi. This is one of the underestimated aspects of Buddhist chanting. People think, sometimes you hear this, chanting, it's just noise, what's the point? They have their doubts. And true, maybe it's not for everybody, but many people I know, and myself, certain chants are very, have a strong meaning over the years. There are certain chants that you find you resonate with, have a good meaning for you, and sometimes you just put effort into chanting that chant, even if you're not particularly peaceful or you're tired, you chant and suddenly your mind goes to a different level. Piti and sukha arise, tears can come, we were talking about that earlier. Many times I've chanted the suttas and the paritas, and tears are flooding down my face just quite naturally. It's not like you want to cry, it just happens because of the state of mind. Sometimes you chant, you go into a state of samadhi. Sometimes you stop chanting because your mind becomes so peaceful, you can't chant anymore, and you're just with that object of samadhi. Maybe faith, recollection of the Buddha, or a certain quality of the Dhamma, metta, compassion, reflection on impermanence, whatever. It can bring up a state of samadhi, just chanting. And it can steady your mind when you're sick, when you're unhappy, sad, somebody died, you're sad, you can chant, it helps. When you're afraid, I'm regularly telling people stories about monks monks who have encountered tricky situations and not knowing what to do, they chant and things go well. One of the trainee novices here last week encountered a tiger snake on the path, and most of you probably know tiger snakes are deadly poisonous. Usually in our monastery they're not aggressive, not a problem, but you never know, they can be. So the tiger snake was on the path, novice monk encounters tiger snake, novice monk stops, what shall I do? Chanting. I think he remembered what I told him. So he chanted Iti Piso, and before he'd finished chanting the whole of the one cycle of Iti Piso, tiger snake moved off into the forest. Crisis averted. Off he went. So chanting holds your attention, keeps your mind steady, and often leads to a good outcome in different situations. I often tell people of different occasions, like going to India in the Indian bus, going through between Bodh Gaya and Saranath or something on a terrible road full of traffic and camels and cows and people and bicycles, and you're fearing for your life as the Indian bus driver hurdles down the highway, dodging everything. And sometimes people get really scared if they're not used to that. They feel threatened, their life is threatened. So many times I've been on pilgrimage to India and we've got the whole bus chanting, Iti Piso, Bhagawa, Arahang, and the whole bus is kind of humming with the sound of the chant, and then that calms everyone as the bus hurtles through the Indian countryside. Even on planes through the Himalayas, getting everyone on the plane, because it's mostly Buddhist people on the plane. As the plane goes through turbulence between the Himalayas, boom, bam, everyone gets scared and things start falling around. Chant the Paritas, chant Iti Piso, whatever's required in that situation, you chant it. When people are sick, you chant for them. You go and visit them, don't know what to do, you can chant for them. When you're sick, you can quietly chant to yourself. When people are dying, you can chant for them. After they've died, you can chant for them. Chanting is a big part of the Buddhist tradition, partly because the first teachings that the Buddha gave were passed down to subsequent generations orally. They weren't written down, they were passed, people memorized suttas and then chanted them out, recited them out, and other people could learn them that way. So it is a big part of our tradition, and it's not separate from the training of mind in samatha, vipassana, meditation. It's another form of mental training. As far as the book goes, well, you've got the right to choose which chants you like, which ones you use. We just provide them for, so they're all there. You can choose yourself which you like. Another question from William. Dear Ajahn, was there a defining moment, a turning point, or revelation when you fully grasped the core essence of the practice? I realize it is a gradual step-by-step process, but was there something that illuminated and cemented your understanding? With gratitude. Well, because it is a gradual step-by-step process, you could probably say there have been a number of defining moments, turning points, revelations. From day one, sitting, meditating. My first revelation when I started meditating was suddenly lots of memories and images of all the good things people had done for me in my life. I was only 17 when I started meditating, and I had memories of people, particularly parents, family members, teachers, close friends, people who have helped me in different ways, came up. And I had this great revelation. A lot of people have helped me in my life, because before that I hadn't thought of that much. So my first revelation was, appreciation that we're not alone in this world. We receive a lot from other people. So then it was gratitude arising. So after sitting meditation, I went off to see my mum. I said, "Mum, I've got something I've got to tell you." She said, "What?" Thinking it was a problem or a disaster. I said, "Mum, I just want to tell you thank you." And Mum looks at me with suspicion. "Thank you? What's happened?" It was out of character, I guess. So my first revelation was thank you to people who have helped me. Beyond that, the peaceful mind is a huge change in one's life. If you experience inner peace, what you might call a state of inner awareness where these 5 hindrances we've been talking about drop away, if only for a period of time. So within my first year or two of meditating, there were some times I would experience that. And when the mind that is free from the hindrances, very still, peacefully internal, no longer during that period bothered by the world, interested in the world, but the attention is turned inwards and the heaviness and the suffering of a human body is gone. The mind is just kind of like independent and happy within itself. Most people find that a very valuable insight and experience because it gives you something, another way of looking at life. You start to realize happiness isn't all about things out there, getting things and meeting people and experiencing this and that. You can also have inner happiness. And from that point on, when you've experienced that, you can compare your experiences now. You've got a kind of hierarchy of happiness, if that's what you want to call it, where you can start saying, well, this is good. You see a movie, you eat some nice food, you have the pleasure of other people's company, you do a job and succeed, you win your game, all the things that we associate with feeling happy and goodness in life, they're all good, but they're different from the inner happiness of the peaceful mind. In Thailand, they call the peaceful mind Jit Yim, which means the smiling mind. So it's like you get this internal smiling mind. You're no longer having to do anything externally to achieve that. You're not having to impress people, go places, buy things, do things. It's internal. You can be totally alone, you could be with other people, but it's an internal experience. So it just changes your way of looking at the world, and you realize a lot of happiness is going to be generated internally. You don't have to chase external happiness so much. And it also provides this basis for then understanding on a deeper level the other Buddhist teachings. The teachings on anicca, dukkha, anatta, the Four Noble Truths, levels of samadhi, levels of insight, understanding what is good karma, what is bad karma, the fruits of karma. Because once you become more aware of your own mind internally, then when you make bad karma, you know it because you feel it, you see it, you sense it. You sense the results of what you're doing all the time much more clearly, having practiced some mindfulness and some meditation. So I guess the first few times experiencing some samadhi, that was quite life-changing. And for me, I didn't turn back. I said, I want to do more of this. Where's the best place to do this? Buddhist monastery. Become a monk. So since the age of about 18, I wanted to become a monk. I didn't go to the monastery properly until I was 20, but I had the idea to become a monk. And that sets up other causes and conditions and the way you choose and decide to do things. Because if you're thinking of becoming a monk, well, then you're careful not to build up too many attachments to the world, because they're going to pull you away from the path of practice of a monk leading to nibbana. So, life as a monk, then there's been other moments and practices and times where maybe insight has arisen, and more than I could say now. So it's not just one moment, it's many, many moments. You might say gradual moments of awakening. When wisdom is not catching up with one's practice, sometimes you have a deep experience of samadhi and wisdom is not catching up, you're not quite mindful enough, you might believe this is it, I'm enlightened. And many people think that. And then, you come down from that It's like, oh, it wasn't what I thought. So you also get moments of disappointment where you thought you had attained something and you realize, perhaps it wasn't quite what I thought it was. But the practice is not certain. If you feel you've attained something or had some life-changing insight, be careful. It's not sure. So Ajahn Chah is an excellent teacher to follow, even these days, just reading his teachings, reflecting on them. One of his core teachings is the anicca, the uncertainty of experiences, whether it's in meditation or just life in general. Don't rush to label your experiences in meditation. Don't rush to believe you've attained something, because that could be setting you up for a lot of disappointment. So, we know all the phrases now. There's no one to be, nothing to achieve, nothing to be, nothing to become. If you are progressing in the Dhamma practice, you're going back to this sense of normality, the peaceful mind, the sense of self, personality, telling the world about everything. That sort of fades from your experience. It's more just the normality of a mind, keeping it free from suffering by abandoning defilements. Whatever defilement arises, abandon it and don't hold on to it. That's the truly normal life. Just like, what is normal good health of the body? Well, if you're getting sick, you treat it. Get over it if you can, unless it's terminal. What is the good health of the mind is you maintain mindfulness and the reflective wisdom of the mind, and you abandon defilements when they arise because you know they're the cause of suffering. So the normal mind is kind of acting in accordance with the Four Noble Truths. The more you do that, the more you progress. The last two questions are in Thai. So I'll have to speak Thai. For those of you who can't speak Thai, if you want to have a new experience, you could sit there listening to me speak Thai, and you'll know what it's like being a foreign monk in Thailand, because we all have to go through this, sitting there not understanding much Thai, listening to Dhamma talks. If you want to know what that feels like, you can carry on listening now, or you just meditate, go into samadhi while I'm talking, it doesn't matter. So, first question. เดี๋ยวจะตอบเป็นภาษาไทยนะถ้ามีคนไทยฟังก็ตั้งใจฟังนะเวลาเดินจงกรมให้เอาสติกำหนดรู้ไว้ที่เท้าแล้วเราสามารถรู้ลมหายใจด้วยได้หรือเปล่าค่ะได้เพราะพยายามให้รู้ที่เท้าอย่างเดียวจิตไม่ยอมรู้ค่ะมันรู้แบบกึ่งที่เท้าและที่ลมอย่างนี้มีผลกับการฝึกสติหรือเปล่าครับก็มีผลถ้ากึ่งเดี๋ยวเท้าเดี๋ยวลมมันจะไม่ค่อยมั่นคงเท่าไหร่ใช่ไหมเราก็ต้องเลือกถ้าเรารู้สึกเดินจงกรมแล้วก็กำหนดที่ลมได้ถ้าเคยทำมาแล้วได้ผลก็ทำต่อได้กำหนดที่ปลายจมูกก็ได้ที่หัวใจก็ได้แต่ถ้ายังไม่มั่นใจหรืออยู่กับลมยากเพราะมีอารมณ์รบกวนใจยังไม่สงบก็กลับให้ไปอยู่ที่ฝ่าเท้าเริ่มต้นอยู่ที่ฝ่าเท้าหรืออยู่ที่พุทโธก็ได้คือในช่วงแรกเราก็ทดลองดูวิธีไหนถูกจริตเราก็ลองทำดูจะกำหนดลมก็ได้ฝ่าเท้าก็ได้พุทโธก็ได้แต่อย่าพึ่งสลับกันมากเพราะเดี๋ยวมันจะไม่ค่อยตั้งมั่นเท่าไหร่สติมันเดี๋ยวลมเดี๋ยวเท้าเราก็ต้องเลือกอันใดอันหนึ่งก่อนแล้วก็ทำถ้าทำเต็มที่แล้วรู้สึกยังไม่ถูกใจก็ลองเปลี่ยนก็ได้แต่อย่าเปลี่ยนปล่อยสำคัญก็ให้มีสติและที่จะช่วยก็ให้มีสติในจุดเดียวก่อนในอารมณ์เดียวก่อนหลายอารมณ์มันจะยากนิดหนึ่งก็เลยให้อยู่ที่ฝ่าเท้าก็ได้อยู่ที่ลมก็ได้แต่ให้มีสติกำหนดสติอยู่กับสิ่งที่เราเพ่งอยู่แล้วก็พอจิตออกไปที่อื่นดึงกลับมาอยู่กับกายอยู่ในปัจจุบัน กำลังจะฟุ้งซ่านก็ตัดความฟุ้งซ่านให้กลับมาอยู่ที่ลมหรือที่ฝ่าเท้าตั้งสติสม่ำเสมอดึงจิตกลับมาอยู่ในปัจจุบันอยู่ในที่เราต้องการเสมอสู้กับมันกิเลสหรือนิวรณ์ธรรมมันจะพาเราไปเที่ยวไปโน่นไปนี่หลงแล้วจะไม่เกิดประโยชน์เท่าไหร่จะไม่เกิดความรู้ไม่เกิดปัญญาไม่เกิดความเข้าใจในธรรมมันจะเกิดความหลงฟุ้งซ่านไปเหน็ดเหนื่อยเปล่าๆนักปฏิบัติต้องต่อสู้เยอะๆตรงนี้ก็ฝึกอยู่กับสติอยู่กับเท้าอยู่กับลมอย่างใดอย่างหนึ่งเลยก็สู้ไปพยายามมีความอดทนมีความเพียรพยายามจิตหลุดไปก็ดึงกลับจิตหลุดไปก็ดึงกลับสู้จนกระทั่งมันอยู่กับลมหรืออยู่กับฝ่าเท้าความรู้สึกจะเปลี่ยนใช่ไหมกายก็จะเบาใจก็จะเบาปิติสุขเกิดจะรู้สึกสงบจะรู้สึกมีกำลังใจอยากทำไม่เบื่อนี่คือปิติคือไม่เบื่อใจเบากายเบาแล้วก็อาจจะทำได้นานกว่าปกติถ้าปกติยังไม่สงบก็ทำไปตามเวลาสักแต่ว่าทำพอยังไม่สงบแต่ถ้าเกิดสติแล้วก็เกิดสมาธิแล้วก็อาการของสมาธิจิตกายเบาจิตเบาก็จะทำได้นานกว่าปกติจะนั่งเป็นชั่วโมงก็ได้เดินเป็นชั่วโมงก็ได้เพลิดเพลินในการภาวนาทำอย่างนี้บ่อยๆก็ดีนะมีความสุขแล้วก็จะเกิดศรัทธาความเพียรพยายามในการปฏิบัตินะบิดาที่ไม่เคยเลี้ยงเรามาแล้วก็มีความทรงจำที่ไม่ดีกับบิดาเลยพ่อแม่ทะเลาะตบตีแม่ตั้งแต่จำความได้พ่อเล่นพนันใช้ความรุนแรงตีแตะแม่และลูกๆดื่มเหล้าจนกระทั่งพ่อเลิกไปเพราะยิงคนตายเมื่อพ่อกลับมาขอความช่วยเหลือครอบครัวใหม่ของพ่อก็ช่วยไปนิดเดียวแต่ใจไม่อยากเกี่ยวข้องเลยอยากตัดเวรตัดกรรมให้ขาดจากกันไปเลยทำได้ไหมครับจะเป็นคนอกตัญญูตกนรกไหมไม่ตกนรกแล้วก็ต้องพิจารณาบุคคลที่เราคบถึงจะเป็นพ่อจริงเราก็ยังมีบุญคุณอยู่จริงแต่พ่อไม่มีศีลไว้ใจไม่ได้อยู่ด้วยกันอันตรายไม่อยู่ด้วยก็ไม่เป็นไรไม่ผิดเราสงสารเขาก็อาจจะช่วยทางใจเราก็เจริญเมตตากรุณาทางใจเวลาว่างแล้วก็ภาวนาสวดมนต์ก็ส่งกระแสจิตให้พ่อเจริญในธรรมให้มีศีลขึ้นให้ละเว้นการทำชั่วทำแต่ความดีคือตั้งเป็นคำอธิษฐานก็พอก็ได้ไม่ต้องไปเกี่ยวข้องก็ได้ถ้าเกี่ยวข้องเราจะเดือดร้อนเปล่าๆก็ไม่ต้องไปเกี่ยวข้องนี่ไม่ใช่อกตัญญูนะแต่ว่าเป็นการรู้จักกำลังตัวเองรู้จักนิสัยพ่อยอมรับความจริงว่าพ่อยังไม่มีหลักศีลธรรมอยู่ด้วยกันไม่ได้ก็ไม่ผิดไม่ใช่ว่าไม่แคร์ไม่สนใจอยู่แต่ว่ารู้จักวิธีที่จะช่วยก็คือเราทำตัวเองให้ดีที่สุดแล้วก็แผ่กุศลไปพอไม่ต้องอยู่ด้วยไม่ต้องเกี่ยวข้องเพราะเขาเป็นคนไม่มีศีลอโหสิกรรมอาจจะอธิษฐานคนนี้เป็นคนดีไปให้เขาไปดีมีความสุขแต่เราเองจะไม่เกี่ยวข้องแล้วเพราะว่าอันตรายด้วยลำบากด้วยทำลายความสุขของเราของแม่เราด้วยเพราะฉะนั้นเราจะให้เขาไปของเขาเราก็หวังดีต่อเขาแต่เราจะไม่อยู่ด้วยเพราะอยู่แล้วก็ไม่ได้เกิดผลดีบางทีในชีวิตก็เป็นอย่างนี้แม้แต่พ่อแม่บางทีถ้าไม่มีศีลธรรมอยู่ด้วยกันยากเราก็อยู่ห่างกันแต่ไม่ใช่ว่าไม่แคร์ไม่สนใจเราก็มีความหวังดีแต่เรารู้เราช่วยอะไรมากไม่ได้ตอนนี้เราก็ต้องวางใจเป็นกลางเขาเรียกอุเบกขาแม้แต่พ่อ ที่ช่วยให้กำเนิดเราบางทีเราก็ต้องปฏิบัติของเราไปก่อนเราไม่พร้อมที่จะช่วยแต่เขาไม่พร้อมที่จะรับความช่วยเหลือเพราะฉะนั้นเราก็ปล่อยเขา So just answered the last two questions in Thai. As far as I know, that's all the questions I've got here at the moment. But it's almost the time, so maybe we'll leave the Q&A session there.